But are you guys ready for our first guest tonight? My first guest gives, among other things, haunted tours around downtown Phoenix. He's an aficionado of Arizona lore and mythology, which suits his title, Arizona's hipstorian. It's Marshall Shore, everybody!
Hey, good to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate
my pleasure.
it.
Whoa.
I am a tree. Yeah,
It kind of sinked down a little.
it is a deep couch. Do you know of a deeper sinkhole in Phoenix? If anybody did, it would be you.
There's that pothole over on 19th Ave.
There you go.
So.
It's akin to that. Well, thanks for coming on Phoenix tonight. I'm a tremendous fan of not only what you do, but the way you look. Your wardrobe is amazing. Who's your tailor? Is he in town? Can I see?
I have a variety of dealers who supply. So
I'm still talking about the clothes, right?
yeah.
Okay. Cool. The boots are fantastic. Look at a shot of these. Did you guys see these boots? Yeah, get a shot of these real quick. Unbelievable. If Arizona had a superhero, these would be Captain Arizona. So are you an Arizona native? Is Arizona?
I am not. I have now officially been here 17 years.
17 years.
So indeed.
Well, welcome. You say now officially. Did the anniversary just kind of roll over?
Yeah, I mean, my first day at work with the City of Phoenix when I moved here was January 3rd, 2000.
Wow. Okay, so we've just reached that anniversary. We're glad you're still here.
Yeah.
Where are you from? And
so I grew up in Indiana.
Oh, okay.
A small town in the middle of nowhere.
Just like one of my heroes, David Letterman.
So exactly, yeah.
Cool.
So going to Ball State. But so the town I grew up in had 25 people, 2 roads, 1 stop sign.
Okay.
So it was a good place to grow up, not a good place to grow old. So I decided to go for an adventure and found myself in New York City.
Wow.
Yeah.
You went east.
I did indeed.
Folks usually go west to discover the country themselves.
Well, it was interesting because the apartment I had, there were more people on my apartment floor than in my entire town, which is pretty good.
And I would imagine the rent for your apartment in 1 month was probably the average annual income in your hometown.
Exactly.
Wow. So what did you do in New York?
So I was a librarian.
Okay.
So I worked for New York Public Library and Brooklyn Public Library.
Wow, cool. Of Ghostbusters fame?
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right.
So yeah. So did a variety of things, kind of bouncing back and forth. Started off actually as a children's librarian.
Cool. Okay.
And then kind of progressed, did a lot of other things. And then decided it was time to leave. We had a mafioso run apartment. So after there was a fire, there was a rat. And so the landlord fixed the hole in the ceiling, the fireman made to put the fire out, with a sheet of plywood, which was great until spring thaw.
Oh, sure.
And then you had to have an umbrella to get through the kitchen. And I was like, it's time for an adventure. And once everything's done, you haul, 4 miles, 40,000, 4,000, 40, what's the difference?
Sure, yeah.
So
you came to Arizona.
Came to Arizona.
Why Arizona? The great Old West? Was that on your mind?
So actually my parents retired out here about 20-some years ago. They're up near Lake Havasu.
Oh, okay.
And in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
So when they actually moved in, they had to have power poles dropped to get power.
Just for them?
Just for them.
Wow.
So that's how remote they were.
That's cool.
They were living in a trailer inside a garage while the house was being built.
A trailer inside a garage.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the Russian dolls of domesticity.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
those Russians, they control everything. So you followed your folks.
It was and so we were in New York, had a bad housing situation, so it was let's go for an adventure. And so Phoenix popped up on the radar as a place to go.
Okay.
And so I came out here, did a round of interviews, accepted a job, and then loaded up everything into a big orange cube and moved on out here.
So at what point between your moving here and now do you realize that you are destined to become the self-professed, I presume, hipstorian?
So when I started working, I was working in a library in South Phoenix.
Okay.
And as soon as I got there, I kept hearing all these oral traditions about the community and realized that wasn't really going on anywhere else, people retelling those. And so I started listening to people and retelling their stories, and then people kept saying, you know more about my hometown than I do.
Sure.
And it got to a point where, there's got to be something I can do with this. So I decided to take a lark leave full-time employment and go for this unknown thing.
Which is the title of the hipstorian.
Indeed.
And
So,
is that something you crafted, or is that
no,
something
actually,
you heard?
during Centennial, in 2012, they did an event on Statehood Day, February 14th, and the head of tourism at that point was describing me to someone else who didn't know who I was. And there's the other historian, Marshall Tremble,
Of course.
who's the official state historian.
Sure.
And so she was like, well, he's not Marshall Tremble, he's the hip historian. And I was like, I'm stealing that, and then it stuck.
Sure.
So
And what are the odds that both of our state historians would be named Marshall?
exactly.
You guys share a laugh over that often?
Well, it's funny because actually we were on Channel 8 last year, and what I always tell people is between the two Marshalls, we have Arizona history covered because he does the Wild West.
Absolutely.
And I really pick up once the car gets to Arizona. That's when I think all the fun really started happening.
Sure.
Because we were able to get around instead of.
Kind of that post World War II,
Yeah,
1950
Right,
expansion.
exactly.
Cool, okay.
Big neon signs going on.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, still citrus groves about, but there is a metropolis growing here.
Right.
Cool, very cool. So what would you say to somebody that knows Arizona only by that Old West reputation, conservative state? If they hear you're the hipstorian, how do you justify that there is something hip about our presumably stuffy old desert state?
One of my favorite stories started from a thrift store. I'm going through a stack of records, and I find this album by Rusty Warren, recorded live in the Pomp Room in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm like, I've never heard of Rusty Warren. I know who she is. So, like a good librarian, I go and find Google. And so up pops her webpage.
Oh, I'm thinking you're scrolling through microfiche.
So, and I pop up to her website, and there's a button that says contact me. So I did. So we started conversing. She, at that point, was living in Hawaii. Sadly, I never got to Hawaii to see her, but she then moved to the mainland. And so for the last 5 years, we've seen each other every once in a while throughout the years, which has been really good. So the cool thing about Rusty is she was a female comedian here in the 50s, 60s, a piano player by trade. In a little piano bar where basically you had a piano that pretty much also was the bar. And so she would do little ditties on the piano as people would walk in. And she hit it big in the early 60s with a song called Knockers Up. Her humor was very pro-female. And so she did this song and her show around the country. So she has 16 albums to her credit.
Wow. Tremendous.
Several of them have gone gold.
Really?
So much so, I mean, she was such a huge deal that she's now being admitted into the Library of Congress, billed as the birth mother of the sexual revolution for that song.
Do people know this name? Am I just
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing.
No, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Knockers up.
Knockers up, exactly.
This guy's just trying to get some street cred over
Fourth
here.
generation Arizona.
Absolutely, I know.
So
Wait, hold on. What do you do?
I'm like fourth generation Arizona.
Oh, okay. So you are familiar with these stories.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Okay, cool. Very cool, man. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, and so what was really cool was right now she's in California, but one of her business people came up, and I got to go through the Rusty Warren archives,
Wow.
which included about 30 costumes, and we're going through. I mean, they're all like late 60s, early 70s, and then there's this one blue thing that's covered in sequins, no label in it, but it's really well made, and her assistant's like going, rumor has it that's Bob Mackie. I'm like, I just touched the Bob Mackie dress. How cool is that?
Very cool. Wow. Where was the Pomp Studios you said?
So Pomp Room was over on 16th Street in Camelback.
What I love about hearing when I hear things about Old Phoenix, I like to visualize where was that spot in town.
Well, and
What's there now?
originally it was called the Pump Room, but there was a lawsuit between a Chicago place called the Pump Room, a fairly famous jazz establishment. And so what they did was they just closed the top end of the U. I mean, a can of paint, there you go.
There's the Photoshop of the day.
Right, exactly.
And that was on 16th Street in Camelback.
Yeah.
Where now there is a CVS and a Chipotle. So the rich tradition continues.
Exactly. All that comedy still happens at Chipotle.
Sure. I thought I tasted something rusty in that last burrito, but I figured that was one of the server's fake nails. So, yeah, that's a tremendous story. And it speaks of the rich culture that was...
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, it's like, so that Marshall Trimble, that old Wild West, a lot of that kind of, that Old West independence is still here. And that's kind of the fun of that, of getting to travel around and start talking to people and getting a chance to hear their stories.
If I wanted to find some scraps of those, of old Phoenix, where are some good spots in town that are still somewhat preserved in that way?
It depends on what you're really looking for. I mean, you've now got places that are trying to rehash. So you've got the Womack now, which is trying to be Chez Nu.
It's over on 7th Street. Yeah, I haven't been there yet.
Yeah, so I haven't been there either. I'm kind of like, kind of almost resisting because it's like, I love Chez Nu.
Oh, I see. Sure. Yeah.
So Chez Nu was the type of club where you walked in and it was dark, dingy. You walked in and you actually had to stand there for a few minutes to let your eyes adjust.
Right. Wow.
So.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Womack would be a spot, presumably, having never been.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I love this whole research of history. I mean, you've got Valley Bar, which when you walk into has this great shadow play above the bar that's talking about Arizona history. It's the story of Wendy Ruth Judd, our most infamous murderess. So you've got directly on the other side of Central, you have Melinda's Alley, which is a neo-speakeasy as well, and takes its name from that alley that was kind of our red light district back in the day.
Sure.
Like 1890, 1910, kind of in that area. So,
and it was called what?
Melinda's Alley.
Melinda's Alley.
So, and it actually looks like we just recently have found Melinda.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she died in 1909. And so what's interesting is she started off life in Louisiana as a domestic, made her way to Tucson as a courtesan, and then made her way then to Phoenix, still as a courtesan, kind of, but was beloved by everybody. And so in her obit, it talks about how everyone loved her, didn't matter your race or whatever. What's really interesting is that someone who was living on Melinda's Alley would be buried, she's actually buried at Greenwood Cemetery right next to some of the African-American elite of that time.
Wow.
So she had some benefactors. Somebody had to help her get there.
Sure.
So we're trying to figure out kind of how did that happen.
Amazing. So many things that folks hear of often find their roots here in Arizona. You say Melinda, and it made me think of Miranda rights.
The Miranda rights, exactly.
In that same area.
Yeah.
That's where it all started.
Right, exactly.
And then the San Carlos Hotel, one of the most infamous haunted hotels in America.
Yeah.
And you give tours that...
I do a haunted tour. Actually, I've got another round of tours coming up. We do a Wendy with Judd tour, as well as a Haunted Phoenix tour, and those are coming up February 18th.
It was shortly after the statehood.
Yes, exactly.
On purpose?
Exactly.
I see. Cool. So what would somebody expect on one of these tours?
Well, we leave from the Claren Hotel, which has its own bit of infamy.
Oh.
So the Claren Hotel opened up in '73, was always kind of a not so nice hotel. It was the type of place where if a visitor wanted to go to lunch with someone he didn't want to be seen with.
I see, okay.
Whether it was a business associate or maybe someone who wasn't his wife.
Oh, okay, sure.
So it was a good place to go hang out. And so in 1976, there was a reporter, Don Bowles, who was researching with the Arizona Republic horse racing, mafia, and land scams. And so he went to the Claren Hotel.
My holy trinity.
So, probably not alone in that.
Probably.
And so he went to the Claren for a meeting that didn't happen. As he was backing his car up out of the parking space, his car blew up.
Whoa.
Yeah, so he survived for another 11 days. As far as we know, he is the only American journalist killed on American soil in the line of duty.
Really? Wow.
So when he died, the reaction of journalists was to come to Phoenix and continue his work.
Sure, okay.
So you've got, there's a local production company getting ready to, their next movie, they did Rents Never Closes, they're going to be doing, their next movie is about Don Bowles.
Oh, cool, okay.
Ben Affleck owns the rights to one of the books that the journalist put together, hasn't done anything with that yet, so.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so we leave from there and talk a little about the Don Bowles story, as well as some of the other folks that hang out there.
That haunt the area is what you're alluding to here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we go driving around.
Hookers haunting that area.
They're actually trying to. Well, at one point it was kind of a mafioso drug brothel.
Okay,
So
I'm listening.
And so you're like, when was that? Do I have a time machine? Can I go back? I want to get a room there. It's only $19.99.
Wow, can you imagine a room in Phoenix, 1999? Wow.
So, but yeah, then we go driving around and start talking about some of the buildings around town and some of the stories about who still inhabits those spaces.
Wow, very cool.
And then we wind up at the Pioneer Cemetery, which is down on 50th Avenue in Jackson.
Sure, it's basically just that dirt field with a lot of little stone.
Indeed. So the last person was buried there in 1914.
The last person was buried there in 1914.
Indeed.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's got lots of history. You can go in there and find Darrell Dupa, who was the man who named Phoenix and Tempe.
Really?
He's buried there.
Wow, I had no idea.
There's
That's
a
amazing.
few ladies of the night who are buried there.
Sure.
Jacob Waltz, the Lost Dutchman, is buried there.
Well, I guess we found him.
So, but not as gold.
The gold.
Actually, I've had people say, it's like, oh, I thought he was lost. No, we know where he is.
Yeah, it's south.
The problem is, we don't know where his gold is.
Like he's right here. He's been here for over 100 years.
Yeah, and no gold on him.
Oh,
So.
and pre-gold teeth, too.
Yes.
Man, oh man. What is your favorite, is there a favorite story you like to share? Have you shared it with Rusty, or is there something that's really won you over the years?
One of the things I love is you keep finding these, it's like little pockets. So, I mean, as we've talked about, I like clothes.
Okay.
So,
I presumed as much.
And
yes.
so, you've got Lloyd Kiva-New, who was a Native American fashion designer who was working in Scottsdale as well as Santa Fe. He's the one that popularized those Fiesta sets, those really classic, in the 50s, those pleated skirts with the matching tops and everything
Sure.
that made them the thing. So he actually opened up the first retail arts in Scottsdale, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
They just did a huge exhibition of his stuff in Santa Fe for his 100th birthday. And so that was really cool to go to and to see his stuff. And he did men's stuff as well. In fact, I've got a friend who has a Lloyd Kiva purse, and he would write in on the label who owned it. And so I've got a friend who has Mrs. Maytag's purse.
Maytag, like Maytag?
Indeed.
Wow!
Yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
I love how from this one little purse, you can talk about Maytag history, you can talk about zoo history, because they started off the first Phoenix Zoo.
Oh, cool.
So it's like, I love the fact that with this one little piece of leather, you can tell this whole story about Phoenix history.
Amazing. That's so cool. And you make it sound so cool, too. History could be a stuffy subject for a lot of people. But
It
you make
can
it
be.
sound...
So I mean, in my own thought press, I'm very nonlinear.
Sure.
So I'm like, I connect all kinds of things that most people normally don't connect.
And what's cool about that, if I dare say, is folks often tell history in the linear chronology of time, but what you've been able to do is connect the dots in a less linear way through trends, or in this case, salacious crimes, or whatever's the most interesting to people, so that you could get the actual stuff in there that's worth learning. That's very cool. So, Hanny's is one of my favorite old spots.
Indeed.
Can you indulge me with any tales of Hanny's? Or?
Well, I mean, it's like, you've got, it was the 1947 was when it opened up. It was the modest building in town. And in some ways, if you still look at it, you can still see, if you see on that very top piece, you've got the Swiss cheese shaped structure up there. Just the shape of the building and everything else. And it was the place where that's where you went to go shopping for your menswear.
Sure.
And I love that when they did that building, they kept up some of the names. When they got in there, what was left.
Yeah.
It had been at one point used by the fire department as training ground. So that's why that one elevator shaft with the glass bottom.
Sure.
That's why it's all burnt, because they would light fires in there and practice putting them out.
Oh, okay. I just thought that was like hipster chic. Let's make it look a little ashy.
But what a lot of people don't realize also is that building is so massive that there are apartments in that building.
Oh, sure. You could. So are folks residing in there today? Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So cool.
And it's a really great space.
What do you think the history of our town is? I just posted this thing on Facebook in the context of artists and their camaraderie or lack thereof. That Phoenix is kind of a city still in its teens when you compare it to other capital cities in our continental United States that are a little older and more established in their architecture and cultural development and so forth. Do you see Phoenix having an established identity? It's a southwestern town, or is it still evolving and will become something?
I mean, it's still evolving. I can remember moving here and really from, almost like Buckeye to Apache Junction, it was kind of one seamless city.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're starting to get not just towns that feel different, but also now neighborhoods that are developing their own distinct flavor.
Sure.
And so I think that's really interesting to kind of be around as that's developing. I mean, if you look at Grand Avenue today compared to what it looked like 5 years ago, completely different.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Roosevelt Road is going through a huge amount of change right now.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of buildings getting ready to open very soon.
Absolutely.
So one of the cool things is, so on Roosevelt at 3rd Street, there's a big new shiny building called Illuminate.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were doing that building, there was a little brick building on one side that had been a dive bar, and by the time we found out that it was going to be demolished for this new project, it was too late to save the building. The building had formerly been the 307, which was an early gay bar.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so we don't know exactly when it became a gay bar. And as soon as the developer heard that...
Somebody does, though.
Sadly...
Somebody was like, yeah. At one point, it definitively became a gay bar.
But it started off originally as Roy's Buffet.
Okay.
Down when it was actually at 307 Roosevelt.
I see.
And then became the 307, and then they moved to 222, but they kept the name 307.
Oh, okay.
So that caused even problems with fire and everything else because they still reported in the 90s.
The street and everything?
Right, they still reported, it's like, oh, it was a 307 at 307 Roosevelt in the 90s. It's like, no, it wasn't. It hasn't been there since 1950 something.
Right.
So, but what's really cool is there's now a plaque in the sidewalk for those gay pioneers of that space, as well as there's this artist you may have heard of called DeGrazia. So he was known, he liked to drink.
Okay. Sure.
And he finally found somebody who would let him paint for booze. So he painted these really large murals inside, and see, you have an aspiration now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
if I could just do this for booze. And then somebody would come along and say, that's fake booze. Anyway.
It's just water. It's just water. So I love the fact that now there's this plaque, and we're actually doing dedication for that later this month.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So, yeah.
So cool stuff like that can be found on your Facebook page. You make announcements for when these
I make
events
announcements for that. I also have my own meetup page.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, because it was one of the things that's like people just saying, where do I find out what you're doing? I also do a lot of work with Arizona Humanities, kind of traveling around the state. And people are like, well, how do we find out when you're doing where? And what are you doing?
Yeah.
So it's like Facebook is so wonky with how it lists things. I was like, let's just do a meetup. So that way it's this long laundry list of what I'm doing.
That's very cool. And I saw you have a blog spot that's actually current.
Indeed.
You're keeping Blogspot alive.
Yes, I mean, it's like I have a newsletter. So actually what I do is kind of just take that stuff and throw it on my blog spot.
Oh, very cool.
Because some people still want that.
It's good SEO happening there because I found it very quickly.
Well, and it's always funny because SEO people are going, who is your SEO person like me? Like, you're doing a really good job. I'm well, thank you. I pay myself well.
Very cool, yeah.
Or not so well.
So they can find that at marshallshore.blogspot.com.
Actually, if you just do marshallshore.com.
Oh, then it just goes there.
Then it just goes there.
Okay, very cool.
So,
and then Facebook, it's just facebook.com
Right.
/.
Right.
And then Meetup, is that just type in Marshall Shore?
Yeah, if you do it's Marshall Shore Retrospectacular.
What is it? What's it?
Retrospectacular.
Retrospectacular.
Indeed.
That's awesome.
So I started doing this about 2010. I did a monthly show called Retrospectacular.
Oh.
Where I just kind of talked about all the stuff I was picking up and learning, and that's kind of what I started doing. And so I did that for about 2 years.
Very cool. Right here, where was that?
It was actually the space over just off 7th Avenue.
Oh,
it was in a furniture store, and they said, well, we have couches, we have chairs, we got wall, so why don't you just come in and do it?
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
So you don't get suckered into doing that. So.
Yeah, right. And you got the haunted tour coming up in February, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, so I've got the haunted tour coming up.
What do you do for the statehood? I mean, that's Valentine's Day, so
right.
How do you show your love for the state then?
I'm actually hoping to be in Bisbee. So we'll see if indeed that works out. So,
that's cool, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I adore Bisbee. I mean, we're actually...
Did you know that you do know this, I'm sure, the 10th hippie-friendliest city in America, Bisbee was named.
I'm not shocked by that.
Yeah, it was, but it was
If you've been there, you'll...
They have like a full-fledged pirate day If you've never been, I think it's in November.
They do.
Where folks just openly walk around dressed as pirates, speaking as pirates. And if you happen to be in town and don't know that's happening, it's kind of odd, as I found myself.
And I hear somebody's actually putting an Alice in Wonderland day together, where the whole idea is that you assume a character from Alice in Wonderland and wander around Bisbee.
Just wander around Bisbee,
So-
the cosplay capital of America.
Exactly.
And what would you be doing down there? Just hanging out? Or do you do...
Hanging out, and then we're actually looking at working with Sutra Yoga. We want to put together a wine and yoga retreat.
Oh, cool.
Down there, and then I'll be doing. They have the most amazing gay pride festival.
Oh, yeah.
So it actually has been rated one of the best in the country, and I would say rivals San Francisco on a complete different scale.
Really?
And so
again, here in Arizona, presumably one of the most conservative states
I mean,
in our union.
I was talking to a friend in D.C. and she was like, I've actually got friends from L.A. who have heard so many good things about Bisbee Pride. They're actually coming from L.A.
Wow.
to attend Bisbee Pride.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Last question, and because we're talking about Bisbee, a lot of people wouldn't know. Is there one spot in Arizona, at the risk of exploiting it and flooding with tourists, that is like a great, off the map, folks have not heard of this spot, but it's so rich in either history, culture,
there's tons of that.
I know.
Well, a lot of people go to Sedona.
Sure.
And I'm like, there's at one point where you get off the highway, if you turn right, you go to Sedona. If you turn left, you go to the little town of Cottonwood.
Beautiful downtown Cottonwood.
Beautiful exactly, where you can hit almost every winery in the state within about a quarter of a mile loop.
That's absolutely right. Cornville, Cottonwood, all that.
And just downtown, you've got all these wineries have tasting rooms.
That's right.
Right there.
I think Fire Mountain Winery. Not a sponsor yet. But they're there on Main Street.
See, and you put it in your thermos, so when
my monkey's thermos. Right. Do you know the monkeys' connection to Arizona? The origin of the monkeys and their connection to Arizona?
You mean Mountain Shadows?
No. What's that? What's that?
So Mountain Shadows is a resort that actually is getting ready to reopen.
Oh, it is.
So
they filmed an episode there. Is that what
they did?
Yeah.
So actually, their first season, the last episode, was then performing here in Phoenix at the Coliseum.
Yeah.
And so they stayed at Mountain Shadows.
And they filmed just some B-roll there, really,
Right,
but
exactly.
they put it together into their season finale.
Right.
Bobby Hart of Boyce and Hart, who wrote a lot of their songs, claims that the last train to Clarksville was actually inspired when his family would drive through Clarkdale on their way to Oak Creek Canyon. Clarkdale didn't quite have that lyrical ring to it, so they changed it to Clarksville. A lot of people think that's Clarksville, Tennessee, but Bobby Hart himself said that's Clarkdale, Arizona. The Monkees started right here in Arizona. That's I've been to Clarkdale. I went to Clarkdale. I actually went to Clarkdale as a pilgrimage of my fandom for the Monkees, thinking there would be a plaque or a statue or something. There's nothing there. They have no idea, and it's just liner notes in a collector's box set.
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that a lot of times we don't necessarily try and document our recent history.
Sure.
I mean, it's like there's some folks who are worried about that Wild West history, and it's like, there's so much cool stuff that's happened recently that we don't have enough plaques or people talking about the history. So that's one of the things. It's like, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a great. I mean, I wish there was a plaque.
I did, believe me, I did too.
When you go to Winslow, there you've got the whole statue standing on the corner in Winslow, Arizona.
Right.
So,
well, I think on that note, you've just perfectly described your role in the universe. You are the one. You're the ambassador of this amazing current history of our beloved city of Phoenix, the state of Arizona. You are the one that's letting us know that there's so much here to be proud of as artists or fans of art in the face of the stereotype of us being that stuffy old conservative state, that old West. It's the high noon in the streets every day or whatever. But there is a lot to be proud of. There is alternative lifestyle history. There is musical history, and even more to be made by the likes of you, my friend. So thank you for doing the show.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Marshall Shore, everybody. Okay, what we're going to do next is have a sketch by some players from First Friday Night Live. First Friday Night Live is a Saturday Night Live style variety show that happens right here in the Valley. So just as this is inspired by Johnny Carson or David Letterman's late night shows, they too do a show inspired by late night sketch comedy. And that happens here at Space 55. Their first show is going to be Friday the 3rd of February, so just a few weeks away. They're going to do a sketch for us here. We're going to reposition the cameras so we can capture it for YouTube. That's what's about to happen. So stick around, we'll be right back. Is that what I should say there? Okay.